He has served in the 27th through the 33rd Guam legislature and has held various legislative leadership positions, including majority leader and chairman of the Committee on Rules, Federal, Foreign and Micronesian Affairs, Human and Natural Resources, Election Reform, and Capital District. He has also served as the director of the Department of Youth Affairs and has served as legislative liaison to the Guam First Mission. And in 2019, our speaker was appointed general manager of the Port Authority of Guam. So members and guests, please join me in welcoming our guest speaker, the Honorable Rory Respicio.
Thank you very much for the intro. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What a segue from Bill 11 to having me here to talk about the topic and what we're doing at the port. I just want to quickly go around the room. I think our board member is here, Faye. Madam Faye, I don't know if she made it, but someone said there she is, our board member, Faye. We have a couple past board chairmen, Monte Mesa and Dan Tedinko. You're members of the chamber, but you're here as well. We have a couple employees from the port, our CFO, Jojo Guevara, and Jesse and Gisette from marketing, and of course my wife, who is among you in the private sector every single day, so I want to recognize my wife as well, Fabrine. So I'm here to talk about something that the port is doing, and thank you, Chamber, for giving me the giving us the opportunity. We're embarking on a tariff adjustment, and we're getting ready to file our petition with the Public Utilities Commission. And what this really is, and I just want to get straight to the point, that this is a tariff adjustment. It's not a general tariff increase. It updates our labor billing from 2020 to 2025. And our explanation for this is when the port floated the 2018 revenue bond, the monthly allotment from our trustee was $4.8 million. Fast forward to today, our monthly allotment is still $4.8 million a month, and so we're living within that monthly allotment. You could see that our workforce size has remained relatively the same. Our hiring has followed a very disciplined, needs-based process, and there's really no significant spike in personnel. And this is the numbers that we report every year as part of our citizen-centric report, which the port has received national recognition for accountability and transparency. And so over the same period, the port, like all of you in this room, is being run like a business. We're results-driven. We remain 100% operational throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. We reopened 3 days after Typhoon Mawar. We've taken on additional responsibilities with the increases of cruise ship arrivals. And every time the cruise ship comes to Guam, we have to coordinate with our carriers, ask them not to come in at the same time. The container yard has to be transformed to a terminal yard, so a lot of manpower goes into transforming to provide for the security and safety of the passengers. We've seen a military surge cargo offloads with overnight and weekend staging, expanded stevedore coverage, port police and Coast Guard support for drills and joint operations, new cybersecurity readiness. We migrated from the J.D. Edwards to the Enterprise One, and the ongoing maintenance of a 42-year-old gantry crane, the rehabilitation of wharves, facility improvements, and ongoing Typhoon Mawar repair work. And as general manager, I'm always appreciative of the hard work, the stellar performance for vessel operations, and achievements that we're seeing across all divisions. And also, in the last decade, we've quantified $106 million in federal support that we received to support the port modernization program. Dan was chairman of the board when the port received the $50 million, and that was a terminal expansion. And then we had subsequent federal support And if you look at the number, got to give it to planning, they've quantified $106,494,698.56. And so going down through that list, and we'll make this PowerPoint available, it basically just demonstrates the port's capacity to manage these federal funds, and it reinforces that the tariff petition is part of a larger strategy and for a fiscal responsibility and operational readiness. And so we don't rely solely on the tariff to generate the revenue. If we can go after a federal grant to do the things that we need at the port, that's what we have been doing, and that's what we have been demonstrating. So why now? Why now are we going for a tariff adjustment? It's what we've explained to your board, and when we've explained this to the board, they said it would be a great idea to make the presentation to the general membership. When the port received its tariff increase in 2017, and in this 2017 increase, the PUC gave the port a 7% increase in 2017, a 7% increase in 2018, and a 1% annual increase in 2019, 2020, and 2021. And so that PUC docket also said that if at any time the consumer price index rises by 4%, and we know that trigger has been met, if at any time the container throughput dropped more than 5%, we also know that trigger has been met, to come back to the PUC for an overall tariff increase. And so although the port qualifies for a general tariff increase, we are just going for a specific targeted tariff adjustment to adjust the labor rates from 2020 to 2025. And also in fiscal year 21, Governor Lulian Guerrero and Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio awarded the port with $15 million from the American Rescue Plan funds, and said that don't think about anything to do with the tariff for 2 fiscal years. And so we did that, we honored that, and that's why we're here today. And so how did we calculate this 17%? I know the font's pretty small on the board, and again, we'll make this available, but we looked at all of the current labor rates. We'd look at all the positions that are chargeable per the vessel operations, like cargo checkers, crane operators, equipment operator, the riggers, the stevedores. And so you could see, for example, in the stevedore, there's a 33% disparity from what it should be now versus what we're charging. In the cargo checkers, it's 12%. And so if you take the average, and so for each position, we take the lowest of the position pay scale and the highest, and we get the middle, the average. And so if you take that, there's a 14% average labor. And then for the equipment rental, you'd look at the inflation rate from fiscal year 2019 to 2024, and then there's about a 20.9% increase that we've quantified. And so you just take the 2 and add it, divide it by 2, and then you get the 17%, and that's how it's being applied. And so what we're asking the PUC, ladies and gentlemen, is we believe is very structured and predictable. We're asking the PUC for a phased implementation for the first 4 months to allow us to have an 8.5% increase and then 17% thereafter. Again, this is not an overall tariff increase because we're not applying these increases to the crane surcharge. We're not applying these increases to facility maintenance fees. We're not applying these increases to marina fees and the fuel surcharge and also the leases. And then we always think about the real impact. And then the real impact we've quantified to a can of Spam, we believe is a fraction of a penny. To a 20-pound bag of ice, 2.5 cents. To a canned beverage, also a fraction of a penny. And when we presented to your chamber board, what I said was, if you look at a 17% increase, and for the everyday shopper, we all go shopping in a mom and pop store and a grocery store, and after we go to the cash register, and if our bill is $100, and that's common, if our bill's you're thinking 17%, now your bill's gonna be $117, it's not gonna translate that way. It's, as you can see, what this would mean in terms of because it factors differently, and I'll show you how. So these are real invoices and a real scenario of what today's invoice looks like to a particular carrier versus what it would look like if the PUC approves. When we met with the industry, this is what we promised we would present. We would present what their current invoice is, and we would give a scenario of what this impact would translate to. So in a container vessel 1, the impact will be $61.82 per container. In a container vessel 2, impact would be $63.92. In a break bulk plus container, the impact would be a 12% increase. And in a ro-ro vessel operation, these are particularly for vehicles, anything that's, so the impact per vehicle is $15.93, and in passenger vessel, these are the folks that come in from the cruise ships, it's $14.31. And all of this information has been shared with our carriers, and I see many of them in the room today, and we also had a meeting earlier this morning. And so again, what this petition does, it updates the labor charge out and equipment rates to reflect the 2025 rates. It clarifies that this is a tariff enforcement, it's not a general rate increase. It's validated by the stakeholders through outreach, and through internal audits, through WSP's review tied to the current tariff structure, and also the finance division's coordination. It's a phased implementation, 8.5% for the first 4 months, 17% thereafter. And what we're doing different in this petition, unlike what it currently says in our tariff, is we're asking the PUC to figure out a mechanism where, like, every 3 years, if the CPI goes up or the government pay scale shifts, that the PUC would do an automatic review of the port's tariff, so we don't have to go through this exercise. And so it's not, that mechanism is not currently in the tariff. And I'll be available also for any questions you may have, but what the Chamber Board also asked me to touch on is the Port Readiness Plan. And in the Port Readiness Plan, we were able to put a plan together that's funded by OLDCC. OLDCC was created in response to the military buildup. This is the office that's supposed to, that is actually working closely with the governor to mitigate any impacts the military may have. And so we had submitted a grant, and we asked them, could we develop a port readiness plan? And they said, Rory, what is that? So he said, a port readiness plan is something that we can present to Department of Defense, and so we could continue the narrative that if the port is not ready, the military is not going to be ready. And so the last several years, that's been top of mind for DOD. I had a meeting in the PACOM in Hawaii, and with Admiral Akanilog and a few of his J4s and J5s. And they said that when they did their analysis, it showed that there's enough terminal yard space for all the container throughput that's coming into Guam. And with 3 working cranes, everything was going to be okay. And so I responded that if military buildup 1 happened when it was supposed to happen and there was no delay, those cranes would have been okay. The cranes were bought used from the Port of Los Angeles, so they're in their 2nd lifespan. And so 1 is set to retire 2028, second one 2030, and the second one in 2026, 2028, and 2030. And we have been working on the specs. We just have been trying to find the funding to be able to replace these cranes. And I asked them, can you give us some time to work with our consultants and quantify what it would mean if 1 crane goes out? And so they said yes. So within a week, we did that. Through our consultants, through the team, we quantified what would happen if 1 gantry crane went down, let alone the civilian community's needs. What would that mean to the military impact? And so we told them that if 1 crane went down, it'll set back the military readiness program by about 4 years. And so once we started socializing that narrative, that language, we could see, the shift change, the attention change. I got the chance to be with the governor in meetings with Pentagon. At the Pentagon, that's what she tells DOD. That's what Indo-PACOM is aware of. If you look at the study that was commissioned through the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, that that mandated what kind of impacts they would mean for this military buildup and how Guam has to be ready for it. If you look at the port section, they make it very clear that if one gantry crane goes down, it'll set back the whole military readiness program by about 4 years. And so I say this in the context of where we're at today. And where we're at today is we have 3 funding opportunities, of course, for the same funds. Congressman Moylan was able to put, he called me and he said, Rory, I was able to put the $60 million appropriation in the big, beautiful bill. Of course, that passed the House and it's working its way through the Senate. What will happen, who knows, but at least there's congressional attention to how the Port of Guam needs to replace its 3 gantry cranes. The next chase is through the governor, lieutenant governor's advocacy through the economic adjustment process through DOD. And what that means is that when Secretary Hexef came to Guam, Governor Leon Guerrero told him that he has the authority through the EA to convene any federal agency that has the ability and the funds to mitigate whatever the military impact would be. So for example, the port has a grant with MARAD for the gantry cranes. It's just as simple as the Secretary of Defense calling Secretary of Transportation. I don't need to oversimplify it, but that's what that process is. And so the other process is through MARAD. For the 3rd time in a row, we submitted a grant application for 3 gantry cranes. And what's different this time around is the MARAD finally approved the waiver from the Buy American requirement for the SDS gantry cranes, but they were very specific and they described very carefully with no uncertain terms without saying it, except for a China-made crane. So, and that's because when we're talking to Department of Defense at every level, and we tell them that unless it's DOD funds or federal funds, unless the color of money dictates otherwise, if it's port funds, if a China-made crane is the lowest, most responsible bidder by procurement, then that's who will be selected. And then so I remember a meeting, it was the Admiral that asked me the question again, and I gave the same answer. And then someone else in the room asked me the same question. I'm thinking, I'm gonna get arrested for treason. But I gave the same answer, but I said, unless it's DOD funds or that color of money. And so you have everyone saying the same, speaking the same language, right? We're unified with this need to replace those 3 gantry cranes, and the port readiness program speaks to that. There's also the plan for how HWARF can be a joint use facility for the Navy. There's also what can be done with the fill piers and the fill storage facility. And most recently, the board said, the port's not in the fill business, and let's look up a public-private partnership. And so we're working on the specs for that. And DOD is also thinking of how they can support that, and also the industry is stepping up to see how that can be made possible through a P3. And so in a nutshell, that's the port readiness plan and how the port's positioning itself to continue to support any military readiness efforts that are necessary. We've also been able to communicate that the Port of Guam, it has a dual role, commerce and national security. And I think this is why we have come this far in terms of getting, the support and the attention that we need. Now we just need the funding. And in the final slide, it's just a commitment and a pledge that this tariff adjustment is not about a new bond or bond borrowing. You would know if the port had to borrow new money for CIP or anything like that. But what this is just looking at our business model and looking at how our rates right now are not tied to 2025 and how that has to be updated just as what we've been doing since 2019, looking at the tariff structure, looking at how we're billing, working with the industry, working with the carriers to see whether other areas we can maximize on the tariff. And so it's really about operational integrity and fiscal responsibility. And thank you for your time, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have. There you are, Jack. Oh.
I just want to start off, I've got a general question for you. I don't want to put you on the spot. But if we hit certain volume KPIs, we talked about funds kind of being lower than they were previously, but if the military building results in increased volume improvement, if tourism recovers, if people go back and more volumes are coming through port volumes, something like that, is there any opportunity for revenue rebates or relook of the increases that are increased?
That would be a good problem to address. But then we're always playing catch up with maintenance. We've had a lot of, there's preventive, before we weren't even doing preventive maintenance, it was deferred maintenance. And so you could see in the buildings, what we've been having to do, find funds, look for additional ways to just, I always say the reality is we're figure skating on thin ice, and I don't need to sugarcoat anything I never have. That's probably why I'm getting in trouble sometimes. We're figure skating on thin ice. You have 3 42-year-old gantry cranes. You have facilities that are in need of repair, which they're being repaired right now. So if we ever come to a point where we have, you meet those KPIs and the port's collecting more than you think it needs, before we think about a rebate, we should think about what other areas of the port do we need to modernize before we do any rebates. Yeah. Kim.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much. When you met with the board, you gave. Sorry, now I won't. Yeah. When you met with the board, you educated me a lot on the way the board, the port works. I also am very grateful for the continuing the CIP and continuing to invest in the infrastructure. We as private businesses have to do the same thing, and unfortunately a lot of that has been slipping over the last number of years. One thing that I did see in the papers that you provided, I'm not as concerned about the capital improvements as I am the salaries, because some of the salaries that I saw that were included were like an 88% increase in the cost of like security guards. So going from salaries of $36 an hour to maybe $65 an hour. And I asked you at the time, was the port included in the 22% across the board that the government of Guam received about 18 months ago? And you informed me that you were not. But I think at the same time you did say that the port personnel were receiving annual incremental
Correct.
increases. So it feels to me a little excessive on the manpower increases, but that's only because as the private sector, I think we're sort of struggling to survive.
Yeah.
So that's not actually a question, that was just me talking. So.
Kim, that's a good comment, and specific to your question, that 88% increase for security, that's tied to the cruise ship operations. So we looked at areas, like I said, in the current tariff where we haven't really been charging. And so when a cruise ship comes in, majority of the port attention is really on security. So that's port police. So that's where those increases are for that particular salary.
How much are the usual incremental increases, like annual?
So every year for our personnel rules, the employees go through an evaluation, and they get percentage based on their performance, outstanding, satisfactory, and it could range anywhere from 5% to 3% to 2% or 0%.
Hi, Rory.
coincidental.
Probably one time I'd be
Yeah.
happy to share the love, but anyway. I just want to thank you, first of all. You've been very engaging with all of the ocean carriers who are part of this board. You usually engage with us in a number of instances. Today is another example. And each time, I think you've helped us understand a little bit more about the increases and what's happening with the finances in port. We've also done our own research. Some stuff you didn't cover here today, but it's available publicly to understand the situation in Puerto Rico. And, just want to encourage you to, one of the things, I think Kim mentioned labor rates, but some of the feedback we've gotten from the rest of the carriers is about just making sure there's enough people at the port, especially in the operations group. I noticed the numbers are on a downward trend. I know what's happening with that, but just making sure that we do have enough people working at the port. I think there's people that are retiring over time. They're probably higher paid. We're getting some people on the ground level. They're probably starting their careers, and then they're probably lower paid. But it's a number of people that we want to just focus, because that's what drives the productivity of the port. That's what keeps things humming, and that's what gets all ocean carriers' products out to the community, which is so vital. So we just want to encourage you to just keep that in mind as you consider increases or your plans for the next several years. That's something that's really important to the ocean carriers. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick.
Good presentation, Rory. This is more of a comment. Prices go up, you can't help but get to raise yours. And it's all the more reason that we get a 1% rollback in GRT. If you could tell that to Parkinson.
Thank you for your time earlier today with the Port Users Group. It was a very informative session. One of the topics that was discussed, I'm going to kind of hit you from left field on this one. It's not really your cup of tea. But could you share your concerns about the 100% container inspection proposal that's on the table from the AG?
I'm happy to. So at the Port Users Group meeting, I asked the carriers to step up and support customs, because the biggest misconception is that there's a perception being played out that customs is just releasing containers at will. They have pre-screening, they have screening, they have targeted containers, they do their due diligence. And the other thing to point out that customs and Chief Ike does a good job at doing, and anyone that will listen to what he's saying, is that on a national average, the rate of inspections at the Port of Guam is similar to what they're doing on a national average. And so could they be doing more inspections? Certainly, but national average, check marks that box. And so for someone to just say that there should be 100% inspection of containers, there's going to be a corresponding consequence. It takes about 3 to 4 hours to devan a container. And what the Attorney General is asking of the port is to have all the stevedores and the cargo checkers, have them now shift their focus from discharging a vessel and now assist customs in going through those containers. And so, I don't know, that's something for this group to communicate what would the impact be. But for us, since 2019, since this administration, the governor and the lieutenant governor, they gave me the charge to do everything and anything we can do for customs. So we came in, and customs, it's their charge, their mandate to inspect containers. So you're not going to see any territorial turf wars issues. We support customs. We now move them into a building right within port property. They're not paying any rent. They're really not. And then they're also got 4 acres of port property that they're going to do a container inspection facility. We used part of that oil DCC funds to do the feasibility study for their container inspection facility. That's what Congressman Moylan was able to use to secure a $2 million A&E grant to do the design for that. And so that's how we've been supporting customs with their mandate to inspect these containers. But customs is very clear that even with the manpower that they don't have, they're not on the side of doing those 100% inspections because it's not being done anywhere else in the world. Yeah.
Was Mara here?
They were, so Marad was here, and they had, they were in Saipan, and they came to Guam, and they had a follow-up discussion with us on our gantry crane application, also the $22 million grant that we got to harden the wharf rehabilitation from F2 to F6. And that's the other thing that we do different, I think, generally, is that before Mawar, the port got applied for was awarded a $22 million grant for F1 to F6. And so after the typhoon, of course, the typhoon changed the landscape of F1 to F6. So I had asked planning, tell MARAD that F3, which was pre-Mawar, was about $15,000 worth of damage. Post-Mawar, it's $18 million. It doesn't make sense that in some areas of F1 to F6, you're gonna have FEMA money, you're gonna have port money, and you're gonna have insurance money, and I see our brokers here, Anne-Marie and Trish, thank you for your help. And so it doesn't make sense that in some areas you have 3 different funding sources. So Jojo and I went to MARAD to have a meeting with them, and they said, you're ready to sign, what are you doing? I said, I haven't signed anything yet, what are you doing? This is not the highest and best use of your money. In some areas, you're gonna have 3 different funding sources for the same area. Our engineers, our owner agent is saying the highest and best use of $22 million is to redirect these funds from F2 to F6. F1, the board is already saying do a public-private partnership, that's Fuel Pier 1. And so let's do the hard work of redistributing these funds. Something Merritt never heard of, but they were very appreciative. This is in the last administration under Biden. And so they did the hard work. Their engineers, our owner agent, through resubmission of all these plans, they developed the new scope of work, and that's what they agreed to do, is to redistribute those funds accordingly. We're still gonna have to put in some money for the additional work that's needed for that area, and then they also followed up on the Marine Highway Grant. We partnered up with the CNMI several years ago to apply for a Marine Highway designation, project designation, and so we were awarded, and as a result, we got $5.7 million worth of port equipment, and just the other day, we have our 5 forklifts that just landed, but these were the 3 top picks, 2 top picks, 2 reefer gensets, 160-foot. So that $106 million I talked about over the last decade, those are the things that keep us from having to go to PUC and say, hey, the rates are going up, raise the rate. I'm kind of envious how others get to just have a rate increase just because, but for us, we're not in that same position because we're not.
Thank you, Rory, for your presentation. For me, it was thought-provoking, a lot of things to consider. I have a military background, so among the financial and political and all those kind of things, I look at it mainly from the military sense. I see the port as the lifeblood of our economy and the survival of our island, actually. I remember vaguely when all 3 gantry cranes went down, and it was tough for our island, right? And so what stuck to my mind is the thought of deferred maintenance versus preventive maintenance. Today we have 63-year-old B-52s flying, and those are the B-52H models. B-52s were introduced back in 1952, and they are still flying. And so the thought of the 3 gantry cranes, and I think you said something about it's more of deferred maintenance versus preventive maintenance.
I was talking about the buildings. But I'll tell you, the priority is always going to be maintenance ever since on the gantry cranes. And we're hiring employees from DZSP. These are certified, top-notch mechanics. Those guys are like magicians. And when they prepared for Typhoon Mawar, what they did that was so impressive is they shrink wrapped the gensets on the gantry crane. And remember, right, Typhoon Mawar, it stayed over the island for I think 12 hours, and it was so much rain and so much. There's not a generator on the island that worked after that. That was what we experienced. Even our load centers of the port weren't working, but the 3 gantry cranes were working. Guys, boss, we shrink wrapped it. Wow. So that's the kind of level of care and professionalism and pride in the work that they do. And so when I tell that story on the Association of American Ports, the Pacific Ports, they asked me to share that story of how we recovered for only after 3 days from Typhoon Mawar. But yeah, the priority of those gantry cranes there's no deferred maintenance there. That's priority. Everything. Yeah. Thank you.
When I heard that, it was like, whoa.
And every year, OSHA inspects those gantry cranes, and they receive. So it's hard, I tell the guys, it's hard to argue those cranes need to be replaced when they keep getting certified by OSHA, but the cranes need to be replaced.
So from what you're saying, PMCS is priority for the gantry cranes.
And
that's what the BPTs are priority.
and Patrick
PMCS is a primary.
Patrick wants me to mention the PMC with Madsen, so we have a partner. Madsen. Yeah, we have a management agreement with Madsen for the technical service for the maintenance of the gantry cranes. Okay, thanks guys. Thank you everybody.
During the recent hearing, we always get the question of, if there is a reduction on the BPT, will there be a reduction on consumer prices? And I'm going to say no now. So I blame it on Rory. But all jokings aside, reduction on the BPT is really up to the employer where they want to put the investment into. It's really up to each employer to directly reinvest it into some of their employees, some of their infrastructures, some of their product. So if you believe in that, please be out there, okay? And I did want to mention that I do see great things happening at the port. And I know Customs did talk to us about the 100% inspection. There are a few comments that they made. If Customs were to convert to 100% inspection, we're talking about massive delays. On top of that, of course, it'll come with fee increases. So those are things that, as a chamber, we need to consider. With that said, I wanted to give another round of applause to our speaker today. I think he did a great job. Okay, if there are no other comments, I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Thank you for being here. I hope everyone enjoyed lunch, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.